get Rachel. And can you imagine? He waited for 14 years for the woman he loved. And it didn't end there. They had to wait for a long time as well to be able to conceive and eventually have Joseph. So, I think before he was even born, he was already destined, to learn to wait for God's time. In Genesis 37, 1 to 11, this narrates the story about Joseph's dream. And it's through these dreams, I think it just made things worse within the family relationship, because I think it was quite obvious for the brothers that he was favored more by their father. And when he had these dreams and when he was able to interpret these dreams, the anger in his brothers' hearts grew even bigger. And then after that, even though he was loved, he had to experience the first blow, which was, I think being hated by his brother is one of the first lows of his roller coaster life ride. And the first low would probably be being hated by his brothers. But then that was compensated by his parents loving him a lot. In Genesis 37, 12 to 36, we could read the story of how his brother sold him to the businessman. I think he had emotional chaos at that time, because being betrayed, by your brothers is one thing, and being separated from your family, especially your parents, is another thing. So he's got anger, he's got longing in his heart. So it must have been very difficult, especially at a young age. He was not a big grown up at that time. He was still very young. And it didn't end there. He became a servant by one of the powerful men in Egypt at that time. And then he was accused, even though he worked very hard. He worked so hard that he gained his master's trust. But then he was accused by Potiphar's wife, and we could find that in Genesis 39. He was accused of a mistake, or not even a mistake, of a crime he hasn't done. So he eventually went to prison. And when he was in prison, he met two people, the Pharaoh's cupbearer and the baker. And he was able to use his gift of interpreting dreams at the time when he was in the prison. He was able to interpret correctly, not just a guess, correctly, the dreams of these people. But then again, that was the key for him to be able to be made known to the Pharaoh at that time. Because in Genesis 41, 1 to 40, we can read the experience of Pharaoh when he had dreams that he didn't understand. And even the wisest people or person at that time in their place could not interpret it. But because Jesus has planned something for Joseph, he allowed him to meet those two people in prison, for him to meet the Pharaoh, and eventually made him the person in charge in Egypt. But his story didn't end there. Probably he was settled at that time. He had family of his own. He was a person in authority. No one could step on him anymore. He was well appreciated by the Pharaoh. And then he met his brothers, the brothers who betrayed him. Probably, again, bitter emotions must have stirred in his heart again as he saw them. These were the people who sold me, the people who hurt me, the brothers who betrayed me. But then in the end, he was able to conquer his emotions, and he was able to forgive his brothers. He was able to save his family from famine. I like Joseph a lot and his story. You know, I have seen the animated story, Joseph, King of Dreams, probably more than 10 times. I'll probably say more than 100 times, because when I was looking after my nephews and nieces, you know, they always watched it. And, you know, I love the songs in that movie. And when I had my own son, we had to keep watching again. So, but I never get bored. And, you know, I have the same emotion every time, you know, when we approach towards the end, when he was revealing himself to his brothers. And it always touched me, and it always caused tears in my eyes. And, you know, no matter how many times I have seen it, because I think it is true. It happens to real life, you know. It's not a fiction, it's not a fantasy, and it can happen to each and every one of us. Sometimes you feel like, you know, I'm the most unfortunate person on earth, and everybody's enjoying their life. Everybody is merry with everything they do, but here I am, very unfortunate. But you see, with him, he was able to surpass all these things. Sometimes our unfortunate circumstances would lead us to thinking and asking, life is so unfair. How can God be good at this? Does He really exist? Or, I have not walked a wayward life, but why am I facing all these trials? Or, how come that those people who do not follow you, Lord, live a marvelous and carefree life, and here I am having to suffer all these difficulties? Or, Lord, these people has done me so much trouble. How come they have gotten the favor? Galatians 6:9, let us not be weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. My friends, let me tell you this. God never promised a perfect life here on earth. But He has promised that He will make all things beautiful in His time, just like David. Whatever you are going through right now, surrender it to God. Surrender to His will. Be patient and have faith in His leading. Even if the future seemed to be so dark and hopeless. In John 13:7, Jesus has reassured Simon Peter by saying, you don't understand what I'm doing now, but someday you will. There may be a lot of experiences in our life wherein you question God, Lord, I don't understand. I don't think I deserve this. Why is this happening to me? We don't understand. But God will reveal His reasons, His will for us in His time. And that's true to myself. Several times in my life, I have wondered, why has God allowed this to happen to me? My plan seemed to be the best and the fittest thing to do or way to go. I don't see anything prosperous ahead of this path God has entrusted me to trod on. But mind you, brothers and sisters, as human beings, we are short-sighted. But God, who knows all things, who is the maker of all things, who is the creator of everything, who sees a bigger picture, knows what's best for us. He sees the future, and what's best is that He always got our best interest at heart. One famous writer said, the two hardest tests on the spiritual road are the patience to wait for the right moment and the courage not to be disappointed with what we encounter. By the end of this month, my husband and I would be celebrating our 4th year of marriage. And during the infant years of our marriage, we have been tried and tested a lot. As most of you may all know, last year was the most challenging time for my family. And I could actually say it's not just last year, but it was the most. Since the beginning of our marriage, we have been tested with, we had to face trials after trials after trials. And sometimes I think, Lord, when will this ever end? Or even at one point I thought, am I being punished for making, this some certain decision? And that's just me and my human thinking. I had my moments where I asked Him, why are all this happening, Lord? It is becoming unbearable. I remember last year, I didn't want to show my son and my husband that I was weak. We all have our moments of weaknesses. So I would wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, hide in the toilet, and pour out my emotions there. And those were the time wherein, I would ask Him just like a friend, not even like a God that I would be so reverent. Lord, why are you allowing this to happen to me? I feel like I'm choking. I feel like I'm drowning now. This is becoming too much for me. But we strive to press on whilst clinging fully to Him. And you know what later? We understood why God has allowed those unfortunate circumstances, as how our shallow human minds could think, to happen. We heard the bad news last March 17, 2015. And this week, the fight we fought has ended. God has delivered us. And it didn't end there. He made us victorious. Yes, life is unfair, and God is not good. Because He is extremely good. He is great. He knows what is best for you and for me. So when you start to wonder, Lord, when will I ever pass this exam? Thank you. Just remember, in His time. Lord, when will I ever mend this broken relationship? Just remember, in His time. Lord, when will I ever find the right man? Just remember, in His time. Lord, when will I ever pass the citizenship? When will I ever be eligible for that security? Remember, in His time. Lord, when will I be able to go abroad so I could provide for my family? Remember, in His time. When will you heal my mother? Remember, it is in His time. Lord, when will I get married? Some of us may ask. Remember, in His time. When will my parents be given justice for the ill fate they had to face? Remember, in His time. Lord, when will I ever get my partner to worship with me? Just remember, in His time. Lord, when will I ever get that right job for me? I'm struggling, dear Father, between having to weigh prioritizing my family and my career. Just remember, in His time. Lord, when will this suffering end? When will you come back? Remember, in His time. God's perfect time may not be on earth. That's why sometimes He allows us to have that empty spot in our hearts, just to remind us that we are not home yet. When all life's trials seem endless, daunting, overwhelming, demanding, tiresome, unbearable, and hopeless, just remember and never forget. With everything that I have said this morning, please bear this in mind. Ecclesiastes 3:11. Always believe, never forget that He makes all things beautiful in His time. This is my prayer.